Send out an all points bulletin because there is a maniac on the loose. Welcome to my review for Maniac. You'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist. There will be spoilers today if that bothers you, and hopefully nobody will get confused as to which version of Maniac this is. This is not the 1980 version of Maniac where that guy goes around New York City and starts killing off prostitutes. I have seen that film before. I really didn't like it at all. I felt like I needed a bath after watching that. Now, whilst Hammer's version of Maniac is not one of the best films in their filmography, not by a long shot, it is at least a little bit more palatable to sit through than the 1980 version of Maniac. So the story for this sees an American tourist called Jeff go and stay at a countryside hotel in the middle of France. He's trying to get over some sort of failed relationship. But the good news, as far as he's concerned, is that he's about to get with not just one new woman, but two. So the owner of this hotel he's staying at is a 40-ish woman called Eve, and she's got a stepdaughter called Annette, who I'd say is about 19 or 20, and Jeff gets romantically involved with both of them. Both women are aware of the fact that they're in competition with each other, sort of. It's friendly enough, but Eve, the older woman, wins the day eventually. She's just got enough experience in a locker for this sort of game to quietly nudge Jeff more in her direction in the end than Annette's. But unbeknown to Jeff, the ex-partner of Eve, who's been in prison for the last few years, he's about to escape. That's our film's Maniac. And as you can imagine, he's not going to be too impressed with the fact that Jeff is now in the life of Eve. So Jeff is going to be in big trouble in this film, and possibly Annette and Eve as well. This film was directed by Michael Carreras, so it's not Terence Fisher. That would be the first thing to say, wow. But Michael Carreras has done quite a lot with Hammer. He produced a hell of a lot of films, and he did direct a few as well, a couple of the Mummy films, I think. The film was written by Jimmy Sangster, and I've seen enough of these black and white thrillers written by Sangster now to sort of be able to spot a lot of his tendencies. A Jimmy Sangster written thriller does have a certain blueprint to it, I've noticed now that I've seen 3, 4, 5 of them. In terms of the actors in this, I don't really recognise a lot of the people here. One exception would be George Pastel, who plays one of the inspectors who comes into the story about halfway through. I recognised him from the 1959 Mummy film, and he's done a couple of other things. But in terms of the main trio, I didn't really recognise any of them. So Jeff is played by Kerwin Matthews. Don't know him from Adam. Liliane Brousse plays Annette. Now, apparently, she was in Paranoiac, a film I saw and really liked about a year ago. I can't picture her being in that film, but obviously I'm sure she was in it. But she doesn't have many credits beyond the 60s, in all honesty. Nadia Gray plays Eve, again. I totally never heard of her before, so a chance to see a lot of brand new actors in this film. So let's talk a little bit more about the actual Maniac in this film, and I'll just get my Blu-ray back up for this. So as you can see from this picture, he does look very intimidating. Look at the words as well: white hot terror, cold clammy fear, and he's got his outstretched clammy hands there, and he's got these blood red goggles. God knows what's reflecting in his eyes at the point that this picture has been taken. He looks very intimidating, and I'm totally sold on the film just from this picture. And then in the prologue for the film, I'm even more impressed, because literally the first thing we see of this guy is him burning somebody to death with a blowtorch. So, you know, goose flesh is appearing on my arm, because even though we don't see this guy again for another 40 minutes or so, the spectre of him is very much in the background as Jeff is wooing his lovelies, because we know the Maniac is going to be a lot more prominent, presumably in the second half of the film. But when he finally turns up, he's such a disappointment. He's one of those villains who just talks too much, and he becomes really pantomime. So he's got Jeff tied up in a chair at one point, and instead of just do what needs to be done, he stands there talking about his evil plan and how clever he is. And this is not what I pictured earlier on in the film at all. He's saying stuff like this: oh, well, you know, the police are never going to believe what actually happened. They'll believe what I want them to believe, because my plan is so clever and I've really thought it through. And, oh, you are so dead. I am so in the clear. I'm probably exaggerating quite a bit, but he's way over the top. He's more manic than Maniac, and my opinion of him just went straight down within like 2 minutes of this particular scene. He gets a chance to redeem himself at the end of the film with a strong finale, potentially, but he doesn't take it. So the Maniac, I forget his actual name if he ever has one, he and Eve, the other half of this dynamic duo of villainy, they realise that they've got to get rid of Annette because she's going to blab potentially to the police. So they take her to this indoor quarry type place, but the Maniac can't even do this right. So when Annette gets out of the car, instead of just grab her and kill her, he lets her get away and run into the quarry. And she gets up onto this really high ledge. And you know what? The police are not even on their tail at this point. So they could just wait for Annette to come down, or maybe just throw stones at her until she falls off the ledge or comes back off it. But because the Maniac is a complete and utter buffoon, he follows Annette out onto the ledge where his considerably heavier bulk is going to be a disadvantage to him. We can see what's going to happen a mile away. He slips and falls to his death, but it's just a silly way to go. What's quite funny as well is the fact that you can see the actor deliberately put his foot on the outside of the ledge a bit too much than is necessary. He's just setting up the fact that he's going to slip in the next shot. It's quite humorous. It's very noticeable. I think they should have called this film Illicit Hearts in France or something like that. Something that would... a title that would take the spotlight away from the Maniac, who's bloody useless, and more onto the Eve character, who is actually a pretty good villain. I totally did not guess that she was a wrong 'un right up until the moment where she actually comes out and says that she is. So I'll give Sangster a few points for that one, but the Maniac himself, I mean, I don't even think that the guy in the second half of the film is the same guy we saw with the blowtorch in the beginning, because if I've got the plot right, then the guy with the blowtorch who goes to prison, he turns up dead in a trunk. And so we actually end up getting a kind of secondary villain who only comes into the plot at the point where Jeff and Eve are turning up to the asylum/jail to rescue that guy. So it's a bit like Iron Man 3, where you think you're getting one villain and then you end up with Ben Kingsley. So yeah, I think there definitely should have been more focus in the marketing and the title on Eve, who is a much better character than the so-called Maniac. Another thing I've got to question as well is why Eve would choose the Maniac over Jeff. Now, I'm not the best judge of male looks, but the Maniac seems average looking to me, and in terms of his personality, I mean, he's just a really obnoxious guy. But if we accept that love is blind and Eve does fall for this guy at some point, surely when Jeff comes along, she would change track and want to be with Jeff more than the Maniac. I mean, Jeff is this really nice guy. He's really good looking. He's sophisticated. He always seems to know what to say. He's clearly got these two women very much interested in him. He's funny. He's good company. The only downside to him seems to be the fact that he chain smokes, but I don't think this would have bothered women back in the 60s. You know, smoking was very much a normal part of society for men and women back then. But it just seems a bit weird to me that Eve would go for the Maniac at the end of this film rather than Jeff. But I guess this isn't something that you would think about before the end of the film. I certainly didn't. It didn't really occur to me this until I was making some notes afterwards. I do have some positive things to say about this film. It's not all bad at all. You know, for me, the biggest negative of this whole thing is the Maniac himself, and he's only in about 3 or 4 scenes. Most of it, I really, really enjoyed, actually. The scenery is fantastic. I thought the film was set in Spain during the first 5 or 10 minutes for some reason. But once I realised it was in France, that's fine too. I've seen a lot of black and white thrillers set in France, and some of the locations are very, very nice to look at. The indoor quarry at the end is a really cool location. Then there's some other nice looking places. Jeff and Eve go to the beach at one point. There's this place on some rocky sort of bluffs that they go to, and lots of nice bits and pieces to look at. I thought the hotel was quite an eerie sort of place for the characters to sit around going through their little dramas as we wait for the Maniac to come into the story. I think the central performance by Kelvin Matthews, very, very strong. I really liked this character that he was playing. I was totally on his side, although I never really doubted that he actually died half an hour or so from the end. So I did enjoy this film. It's just a shame that the Maniac himself, you know, the person in the title of the film, is such a weak part of it. I think if that character had been written a lot better, this could have been an excellent thriller. As it is, it's still a good one. I don't regret buying it. I could certainly see myself watching it again, that's for sure. So I'll refer back to the Blu-ray for the final time today. As you would expect with Indicator, it's an absolutely gorgeous presentation. Not that much in the way of features though on this one. There's no audio commentary, which I was a little bit disappointed by. I'd say there's about 25 minutes or so of mini docs. I've not checked any of those out yet. I might do tonight. I had a little bit of trouble with the subtitles in this film at the start. So when it came on, the characters were talking in French. So I thought to myself, oh, I need to turn the subtitles on then, do I? So I went into the menus and tried to sort that out, but I had real difficulty doing it. And I ended up having to watch the rape scene in the first 2 minutes like 5 times as I sorted this out, which obviously was not ideal. But eventually I got going, and then about halfway through the film, it suddenly dawned on me that I had English subtitles on, but the characters were speaking in English, so why the hell did I need the subtitles on? So I thought to myself, okay, did this film start out in French with the opening 2 characters and then we move into English-speaking people? Or when I put the subtitles on, the English subtitles, did I accidentally turn the English audio on while I was doing that? I don't know. For some reason, I was getting it all wrong setting up this movie, but I thought it'd be worthwhile at least telling this story just in case anybody else has trouble setting things up on this film. Probably not. Probably it's just me. But anyway, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this film. So we got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes out of 5. That's a score I wasn't expecting to give at the time that I finished watching this. My first instincts were to go with 2 out of 5. And then after I thought about the film a little bit more, I went up to 2.5. And then it literally was only when I started recording this review that in my head I thought, no, actually, I think it's more like a 3 out of 5. Because the only bad thing about it is the depiction of the Maniac. And like I said earlier, he's only in the film, you know, for 3, 4, 5 scenes. So given the fact that I enjoyed most of this, I'm going to give it a reasonably good score. So there we have it. That is Maniac. I'll be back soon to do another Hammer review. I think my next one is going to be The Plague of the Zombies because I've literally just bought it and haven't yet watched it. So I'll be back soon for that. So until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.